Yeah, how are you doing?
I am well. It's the middle of the week, not sunny, but it was warm.
Okay.
And we're entering the fall and soon to be the winter season, which means snow is on its way.
Mm-hmm. The opposite for us here. Summer, so it is on its way. So warm weather for Christmas, swimming and being outdoors. It's very different.
Oh, wow. Can we switch places? You come over here and I go over there?
I would love to. I would love to. I love a wintry Christmas.
Really? I want a sunny summer hot pool sitting by the pool with my latte and being fanned by the workers. That's my Christmas.
Yeah, I'm never fanned by anybody. I think you might be disappointed with my level of Christmas.
Well, don't take away my dream just yet, please. So I know today we're going to speak about a few topics that's close to your heart as well as close to mine. It's raising children with ADHD, autism, and how that impacts not only those who are the caregivers of these children, but also um, people in the world, right? Like who's surrounding them. Maybe people want to understand. So do me a favor, Leanne. Please introduce yourself, tell my audience a little bit about who you are, and of course, where they can find you.
Yeah, my name's Leanne Tran. I'm over in Australia, where I have a private practice. I'm a psychologist and I work with children who are neurodivergent, so whether that be having ADHD or autism, and I support them individually to learn skills, but I also support their parents to know how they can change things in their family so that it's everybody is better off. The neurodivergent child can thrive, parenting is easier, and the whole family runs a little bit smoother. Um, I have for that parent work, I offer online programs and courses. So you don't need to be in this sunny part of the world to access that. And I guess my mission is to have no parents feel like they don't know what they're doing in parenting their kids who are developing differently. So, yeah, that's why I aim to share all the information I do and help people online.
That is amazing work. So, what got you into doing this, and what was the genesis of your journey into this field, and why?
Yeah, it's probably a two, there's a few factors as goes into most stories for how we end up being where we are. But I wanted to be a teacher when I was in school and then around about high school, had this shift that maybe psychology would be better, but I still see it as a bit of a teaching role, but it's rather than about you know, academics or literacy, and it's about life skills and who we are as people. So I really enjoy that teaching component. Um, and then when I finished graduating, I worked with children with cerebral palsy and really resonated with the way they weren't able to always access this, or do the same things at school than that their peers could do because when I was young, I had a slight physical difficulty with my hip, and so couldn't do as much as other kids either. And so I think by working with kids who had that similar experience as I did when I was younger, and finding how much joy came from being able to, i- you know, work with those kids to overcome those kind of difficulties and fears by being able to really understand what they were going through has helped me to want to work in that space. And so now it's moved around a little bit to mostly autism and ADHD, but I can still relate to that feeling of things always being a little bit more hard or not quite being able to do things exactly the way others do. And yeah, those are the types of kids that I really want to help.
I have a few friends who have children that have Asperger's
Hmm.
and some other children that are autistic. as well as maybe just children who have more needs than the quote unquote average child. And
Hmm.
one thing that I found common among them is that, well, two things. One, no matter how good of your no matter how good your intentions, you aren't ever prepared.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right? And two, there was a little bit of uncertainty in how it would impact their relationship with other people. Do you see sometimes that being a struggle where some parents who are the caregivers of children with special needs or require a little bit more attention, do you see them sometimes struggling with their relationships, maybe romantically or even some of their friendships in their life?
With the parents themselves, do you mean? Yeah, yes, absolutely. I do. I think, I mean, parenting is always something I feel like you cannot ever be fully prepared for, but at least we have a bit of a template for um, parenting from our own childhood. But when our kids have developmental differences that we are truly unprepared for, it makes it a lot harder. So lots of parents talk to me about difficulties with making or their friends, because their friends don't have that same experience and they don't truly understand how difficult it is for parents of a neurodivergent child. So it can be really socially isolating in that way. It can also be hard to make new friends because of just the extra layer of difficulty in family life. When your kids have extra needs, they might have to go to therapy sessions, or they might find it really hard to play in the playground or play dates with other kids. And so it can be isolating from that point of view. It's also one of the most stressful parenting experiences there is, parenting a child who has a disability or a neurodivergence. So that means it impacts relationships and marriages and that kind of thing because of the extra level of stress. So it is a really common experience. And I think in that way, it's parents will often find connection with each other, with parents of other neurodivergent kids, because there's that real shared understanding there.
I think you're absolutely right because it's not easy. I don't have children. It's not easy being a parent. I look at my dog and I'm like, oh my Lord, just raising a dog can be
Yeah, that's hard
difficult.
enough.
That's hard enough, right? And if I
Yep.
had to go to like parent teacher meetings and conferences, I don't know what I would do with myself. But I do know
Hmm.
that some parents who are raising these children, they're some of the strongest and courageous parents that I know. They're so dedicated, so determined. And
Hmm.
I know that sometimes there's some people who may ask, how do they actually do it? They must be so brave and so strong. And then there's some other people in response to that, they'll say that I'm doing what I committed to do as a parent. Because when I became a parent,
Yeah.
this is what
Yep.
I agreed to do, regardless of how the child came out. But it's interesting, Leanne, to see that there's some parents who are on the outside. They're like, you know what, Leanne? It's better you than me because I don't know if I could do that. Do you see
Yeah.
that side
Yep.
as well? And if you get that side, like what would be maybe your feedback or your response to people who have those types of thoughts?
I think when I listen to parents who hear that, they feel a little bit, um, I guess maybe unseen or just disconnected from other parents who say that. Because you're right that, you know, parents of neurodivergent kids just, people say, I don't know how you do it. And they think, well, I don't really have a choice. Like, this is just, you know, this is what's happened. This is my family. I have to do it. And so then when people add on all of that virtuous stuff about, well, you're just you're a superhero, you're just so amazing, they often don't feel that way. And yeah, it does kind of, I guess, brings up maybe feelings of guilt as well for thinking like that I wouldn't if I didn't have to, or, all of those things that come up when parents are just trying to adjust to the path that's put before them. Um, so I think, I mean, yeah, I'm speaking for people that have a different experience to me, but what I hear them say is they would much rather people just try and connect on a regular level about, how things are going, um, rather than comment on their, amazingness or virtuousness of their path.
What has been your experience personally in regards to your situation and how the world has been interacting with you or how you have interacted with the world?
Um, do you mean just me as a person or just, any kind of way I want to take that?
Well, yeah, yeah, but even if you want to relate it to like what you would do, was I'll give you an example. Like for me, the more I learn about this, I've noticed that my interaction with the world is a little bit different. Because let's say, for
Mm,
example, 10 years ago when I knew very little, basically what you saw on TV, which isn't the best thing to to see, right? When you try to obtain knowledge, I
yeah.
was very
Yep.
ignorant and maybe I came across that way. Like, you know, how you pick up someone's vibe that they don't really
Mm-hmm.
understand. Where now, let's say all these years later, I've had these conversations. I'm like, okay, I navigate the world a little bit more. Like when I see it out in public, I'm like, okay, you know what? You don't want to overly stare because staring is bad. You don't want to come across as being awkward because they have to deal with that already. Because as you mentioned, it's very isolating to be a part of that community, to be going through it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think so that's what I meant where how you're navigating because you probably are more experienced than the average person when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see what you mean. I think it's I can see it happening both professionally and personally. And I think professionally, I've learned so much over my career. And I started out before I had kids of my own. And then once I had my own kids, that definitely changed how I interacted with other people, other parents. I realized the advice I was giving was so wildly, naive. And so that became a big shift. And I think now working with so many families and seeing that all families are just so different, yet so many of us have things that we're struggling with has really made me try and it's made me a lot more patient, but also it's helped me with the ability to see that other people make different choices than I do. And but usually that's from the same place of love and care for their children. Even if my decision would be wildly different to theirs, I can appreciate that it's kind of coming from the same place. But then also personally, when I see families out in the community, when, maybe shopping or at events or something, and I can see they're struggling, I feel like I really want to try and connect with those parents and just say, yeah, I see you. I know how hard it is. You're doing great. Even by just, a nod or a smile or a roll of the eyes when the kid's having a tantrum on the floor. Um, because it is really isolating when you're in that position as a parent. And so I think it's just that extra empathy and understanding that everybody's trying to do their best and coming from a good place and that it's hard for a lot of people. And it's hard for most of us in our life at some point. We'll go through something difficult. So yeah, it helps a lot to understand that, I think, about, before you judge somebody else.
I think what people have to do, and it goes back to the old rule, right? Like just treat people like you would be treated. And I think that
Yeah.
would, right, protect a lot of people and at least so lead to a lot of understanding. There was a time, I'll
Mm,
share a story, Leanne. I was in university. I think it was my second year, and there was someone who was visibly on the spectrum, right? And unfortunately, he was trying to make friends, and there's a group of men, a group of people, young men in the university, who was kind of picking on men
mhm,
in a little way and bullying. So what they would do is because he was trying to understand and navigate his life and trying to fit in a little bit because as you mentioned, very isolated.
Hmm.
They would ask him, they would say, "Hey, so and so, can you carry this for me?" So they would get him to carry
Right.
the papers, right? So what they would do is that they would throw the papers on the ground, and then he'd be picking it up to carry it, right? And they're like, "Oh yeah," so they would go a couple of steps, they'd take it from, then they'd throw it again. So this repeated, and you see this, and it's very heartbreaking because people can be so cruel at times, and
Mm,
sometimes a lot of people who are on the spectrum, they don't understand that's what's happening. The good thing about the story was that there was people that stood up for this young man, including myself, and to say that it's not right. And it goes back to your point where you want to be understanding and as compassionate as possible. No one knows everything on this earth, but if you take it from the
hmm.
perspective saying that what I'm about to do to someone, would I want that done to me? Right. And
Yeah.
even,
Yep.
right. And even more so, if the person isn't able to protect themselves or defend themselves, why would you want to take advantage of that just to make maybe yourself or your peer group feel superior in some way? And a lot of times,
Mm.
I think it goes back to education. Do you think that maybe some of the isolation that comes from others is a lack of education, or do you think it's something else?
I think I think it is a lot of the time a lack of education. I think it's also, like you mentioned, maybe lack of empathy or somebody's own internal feelings of not being good enough, where they're trying to use somebody else to lift themselves up. But it's ironic because in that story that you shared, those people probably were trying to feel big, but all of you around them were not thinking that in that situation. You weren't looking at them thinking, those guys are pretty cool and tough. You were probably thinking they weren't very nice people. Um, yeah, so I think it's a combination of not knowing enough and maybe trying to make yourself feel better by how you interact with somebody else. I'm really excited to see in the clients that I see coming through that there's so much more education and understanding now about lots of these things. And it's becoming quite commonplace. So, being in a class where with an autistic person is common enough now that kids will often say to me that they know what autism is, um, and they'll say, "Oh, yeah, there's someone in my class who's autistic, and a couple have ADHD." And so there's right from a young age, there's acceptance, and they've just created relationships with these